We went back into the city center last time to start building the city's largest mall with very colorful details, holographic ads, and all those kinds of things. It is one of those huge high-density city projects that require all the surrounding areas to be complete for it to shine. So today we will do exactly that. We will return to the empty land just behind the blue Olympic Stadium, where we will build a park. But not just any ordinary park, this one will have lots of colorful crystals. We will also add another sports buildings, extend many of the pedestrian places, and fill big high-density blocks around the area. So lots of things in front of us. We will build on a huge footprint, so let's go do that. I had a pretty good idea what I wanted to build in this place. I just wanted to use these main roads, these main avenues, as the main enclosures, the dividing lines between the park and some sort of high-density structures. So pretty much similar to the New York's Central Park in a way. But then I was just doing this on the live stream. I was just playing around with some buildings. I was just testing certain shapes and just, see what I can do here. And then I eventually decided that I actually want to extend the sports places. I don't really want to just have the Olympic Stadium, the main one, but I want to just add something to it. So I was just experimenting with various buildings that I haven't used yet in the city, like for example this particular stadium. I'm not really sure what it's called. It's kind of in the shape of some sort of like a Viking ship, right? Like turned around. And I was just playing around with it. It's kind of an interesting shape. I was trying to fit it in this place. And then for some reason I tested like combining these different buildings together. I combined 3, 2, and eventually ended with 4. And it's creating quite a nice shape, isn't it? Kind of like a flower or something. And it perfectly fits on the side of the stadium, just between the stadium, the high-speed railway, and the road. So, well, why not? It's kind of crazy, but the Olympic Stadium itself is very crazy, and the park is probably going to be as well. So why not? It's just fitting there in a strange way. It's going to limit the size of the park, yeah, sure. But then again, we are in the center of the city and, well, it's just interesting. Yeah, what else can I say there? So yeah, that happened. Just out of the blue, that happened. The another sports buildings right next to the already established Olympic Stadium. Now that's going to have some implications to the shapes of the pedestrian places. I already mentioned it's going to make the park smaller, yeah, sure, but also it requires some kind of more thorough connections between the buildings for pedestrians and also across the road. Now, I also did this thing because this Viking building, the stadium building, has the ends where it somehow overlaps over just the open ground. So, and by the way, it's just wide enough so that you can go over that main road. So I decided that the main road is actually not going to enclose this entire park area. The sports buildings are kind of going to spill over it a little tiny bit. So the pedestrian places on top are going to be completely separated from those roads. The main road is going to go below in some sort of a trench, and we are kind of going to build some street in the sky over it with these kinds of the established green color as well. But I'm also going to introduce a second color because I don't really want to do it just green in this place. This place is supposed to be special. It's supposed to stand out. So on the side of the green, I'm also going to introduce this red. At first, I was thinking I'm just going to get away with using the park life paths, except the road versions that Chameleon made, I believe. But they were just not really compatible with this green path. That's why I did those circles on the side of the Olympic Stadium. I was thinking that underneath those, it's going to be like a transition between the two roads, between the two styles of the paths, but it was just not looking good. So I decided that I'm actually going to just try this red and try it in the entire park. Now, these particular roads, these particular asphalt decorative roads or networks, they are very good because they do those gradients between the colors. I already talked about it in the previous episode because I used it with the mall, and I am going to use it even in the future for the mall, for some kind of back plaza that we're going to add to it eventually. But Also, in here, when I'm doing this red, I don't really need to do some sort of special transition because the transition is just going to happen on its own naturally when you have different colors of connecting segments. So there's going to be just that gradient of colors, and you can control the size of the gradient, of course, by just extending the segments, move it, and just playing around with node controller as well. So that's quite interesting. As you can see, I am very heavily using node controller. I'm making this, it's just a single network, this one. I'm just making it wider and thinner, doing these kinds of transitions, just widening it gradually, and overall just playing with the shapes a lot. Unfortunately, as you can see, when I'm adding nodes with the network multitool, the color is going to revert back to the asphalt, but that's just a minor setback, really. So I am going to heavily use the shape of that new, I'm not really sure what it is, stadium, some kind of, yeah, let's call it a stadium, just so it's a little bit easier for me talking about it. Let's just use a single word to describe it, but it might be whatever kind of multi-purpose hall for sports, or even some kind of events like concerts and these kinds of things. It doesn't really matter. It might be just some kind of general cultural center as well. But here, let's just call it a stadium, just so it's a little bit easier. Right, so the new stadium, it has that kind of like a floral shape, and I'm going to reinforce that by just putting those pedestrian paths on the outline of that, like a top part of the stadium, okay? So, and it's going to be that red color, so that's going to highlight it even more because, well, it's red, and the stadium is kind of just like gray, dull a little when looking at it from the top, so this red outline is going to benefit it quite heavily. Now here, I'm just doing these kinds of transitions between the red and the green, and the red, like I said, is just going to form the outline of the new stadium, and it's going to form also the smaller pedestrian paths throughout the park, because that's also going to be a very nice contrast to the greenery of the park, because it's going to have also some trees and these kinds of decorations. So, you know, red is going to go well with that. And overall, it's just, you know, something nice. It's also a good contrast with the blue roof of the original stadium. So there are going to be all kinds of colors happening in here, all kinds of contrasts and gradients and these kinds of things. That's really what I would like to heavily focus on in this part of Asturis. Already established it last time with the mall. I already mentioned that that's going to continue, but here in the park, you know, might as well do the same thing. Right, so I decided that I'm going to separate the park area, basically the pedestrian area of the stadiums, and this like a more technical place. So in there, I just placed some office administration buildings for the stadium, maybe, and divided it with a wall. I really did not want to continue these surfaces. I also did it because I don't really want to combine them with like roads on the sides of roads, because that's usually somewhat difficult to achieve with the way these networks work, so it's much better to just completely separate it. That's also partially the reason why the main avenue here is just going down below, and it's not even going to touch any of those pedestrian areas on the top. Right, this presented an interesting opportunity to do this tram line. This is the ring tram line that we did that junction for in the previous episode, that like a circle on the side of the park. Yeah, there you could have seen it on the left. And I really did not know how I'm going to do this track. At first I thought I'm just going to do it straight between the tracks that we already had there, but this presented a really great opportunity to actually create some sort of a very important tram stop for this new stadium. And it's going to be on the other side of this main road. The main road, like I mentioned, is not really geometrically now going to create any sort of outline or anything. It's just going to be below this pedestrian level, and the outline of the park or of this pedestrian place is going to be kind of loose. There is not going to be like a very well-defined outline. Well, maybe the buildings are going to, in a way, do the outline, but not the road. So that's actually quite nice, because you have that separation between the roads and everything else that's on the top. Even the buildings, like I said, even the stadium, a little bit spills over the road. So the road is kind of like in the background now, much more than it used to be. So that's nice. Now, there are going to be these holes, though. The fingers of the floral pattern are just going to like radiate these red pedestrian paths over that road down below, and they're not going to be like super wide. So between them, there are going to be all these holes looking down towards the road and towards some greenery. So there are going to be all kinds of palm trees there, and it's going to really look nice. I'm also going to extend some of those crystals into this area just so the park really isn't like very well defined. It's just going to like spill into these neighboring places. I think I really like that kind of style. Anyway, as you can see, heavily using Node Controller, heavily playing with the directions in Node Controller, because that's going to allow me to do these kinds of like more organic shapes with these pedestrian paths. Or, well, they are not pedestrian yet. They are just decorative paths, but I'm mostly doing that to really save networks, because I'm just using a handful of networks in this place, really. And the rest of the details, the rest of the like shapes and geometry, that's all done with Node Controller, because it could be done by just simply doing the outlines manually with new networks, but that would just result in a lot more networks, and it would probably be a lot more work as well. So this is kind of like an ideal technique, I suppose. And then I'm just going to put these like railings on the sides and be done with it. I'm not going to do any kind of pillars or supporting structure, because all of these pedestrian places are wide enough, so we are never going to see below them. So, you know, I don't have to build what you cannot see. And it's actually going to look nice when it's going to look a little bit like it's floating over the terrain and the road down below. That's just going to, you know, be a little bit more interesting, I guess. But, well, we will see how it will turn out. Right, so here I'm just trying to build it symmetrically, so that's why I copy-pasted it with Move It, just mirrored it, and later I'm just going to do some kind of tweaks to, with Node Controller to these kinds of things. Node Controller sometimes produces weird results, like if you, for example, have completely straight piece of some kind of road, you're going to change both sides exactly the same with exactly the same values, and it's going to just do something different. So sometimes you just have to kind of eyeball it, not really rely on the numbers too much, and that's why I'm trying to do it symmetrically here. That's why just, you know, aligning it to the already mirrored fences here on the sides is just going to be so much better. Now, since I'm using that green path here on the side, by the way, at first I was thinking I'm actually going to do like a third stadium on the other side of this road instead of this mall, maybe smaller mall that I built here, but I didn't really find any. But if I did, then I would probably build it with also another color of this pedestrian path. But since I did not really find anything special, I just reused this green, and it actually has a purpose in here because, as you can see, it is going to, along these tram tracks, going to connect to the rest of this green network in the entire city. Now, by the way, when I was doing that Altengrad episode on Streets in the Sky, I learned about, for example, the Calgary's Pedway, was it called? No, that was the London's was called Pedway. In Calgary, it's called something different. But was it Calgary? Actually, I think it was. Right, so I did not know about them at all, right? So when I was doing Asturis for the first time, and when I was thinking about doing this like elevated, disconnected pedestrian infrastructure through the rest of the city, I was just thinking, yeah, it kind of makes sense, you know, it's going to be like futuristic, kind of convenient, and yeah, it's just great. And then I was doing the Altengrad episode and learning about all the plans and all the build projects in real life as well. And I was like, hey, that's Asturis. That's exactly what I'm doing in Asturis. So that was kind of surprising, but I did not know about those projects from real life. So that was all the more interesting to find out that, well, yeah, it actually makes sense in some real life projects as well. Obviously in real life, it has like many different realities and like complications and consequences and all of those things. But here in Asturis, we don't need to care about that. I'm just trying to create like a nice looking infrastructure all over the city and in some kind of like utopian futuristic settings, all of that. But, you know, I'm not really thinking about it that much here in Asturis, of course, unlike in Altengrad. Now, anyway, so I am connecting it to the rest of the network, like I mentioned. On the other side, on the side of the mall, I guess that's not where it's going to be connected, because also you could have seen me just do the transition there between these colored paths and just asphalt. Well, not asphalt, pavement, but it's never going to look very good, right? But somewhere you have to do it. I think I was doing it in some different places of the city in the past, and it's always looking a little terrible, but it has to be done because eventually these kinds of pedestrian elevated paths, they have to connect to the surface. Sometimes I'm doing it through elevators, stairs, so there is like a different material, you know, just presenting itself as a divider, but sometimes you have to do it on the same level, and there is no other way than just to like do some sort of transition. And it's probably best to just not really do it like that pronounced, but just like very suddenly just cut it and be done with it. On the side of the park, it makes sense, I guess. It could have been probably done a little better than just, you know, like a sudden transition between the two materials. But it's okay at the end of the day. It's not really the main focus of it. The main focus of the place are the paths themselves inside the park itself, and all the rest of the buildings around it. So I guess that's okay. Now, I was mostly done with the rough outline of the things, and you know how I do things. I'm just trying to create the rough shape, the big things, the visible things, and then I'm just going to go for some sort of like different places where I can just do the same and then just like iterate over and do the smaller details last. So that's exactly what I'm going to do right here. I'm going to connect these pedestrian places to this lower level of just some kind of city blocks around the stadium area. In this particular area, it's much lower, as you can see. It's on the other side of those high-speed tracks. So the high-speed tracks themselves are going to be like a nice divider between some super high-density blocks and the stadium area. Now, because there is that elevation of the terrain, I have to build some sort of connection. And since it's a stadium, it's probably going to be for lots of people. We have to also build big stairs, just like over here. They're going to aim directly into this intersection. It's not going to go like anywhere really. It's just going to like spill into these high density blocks, and people from all around this area can just, you know, go there and eventually all merge their paths at the stairs. Now, I'm not going to do anything super special below these train tracks either. I'm just going to do like a concrete wall. We can imagine that there will be something below these tracks, maybe some kind of warehouses in these retaining walls. On the other side, actually from the stadium side, I am continuing those already established like glass facades. So there's probably something inside of these. Like I said, some kind of warehouses, maybe some technical areas or something like that. That's not exactly important, but the high-speed railway, first and foremost, serves as a perfect divider between those places, like I mentioned. Now, I'm going to fill this huge chunk of the city by just some kind of high-density fill. I really did not want to do it, to be completely honest, in this project. I was thinking that I'm already filling like a huge volume today, a huge footprint in the city, and this could probably be some different project. But then again, these kinds of high-density fills, they just need to happen. They're not particularly interesting on their own, but together with the rest of the city, together with all the rest of the blocks, they are amazing. I really like this. Just this super high-density feel of the center of the city. I really want to achieve that. And it's not super interesting to build it, but it's really interesting to have it finished and just be there on the side of the more interesting project. Of course, if the entire city was just comprised of only the interesting project, I probably would never finish it because it would take just forever. I would never have that quantity, first and foremost, and it would be kind of boring in the end because you kind of need to have the more scuffed areas so that the better areas are just going to shine, right? You have to have the downs and ups or something like along the lines of that. Now, I was also completely finishing, I'm not going to return to it at all, this embankment for the rest of the railways, the ordinary railways. So once again, I had this, for example, this pedestrian path running along the lines, or along the sides of it, from the main train station in the city center all the way to this station. And along the way, it's just going to have all kinds of access up here from the nearby buildings. I'm not really going to build those, but I am doing the invisible pedestrian paths on it and just connecting it to various streets that it crosses. Over here below this like brutalist train station, I had to cut some walls just to connect it there and into all the rest of the invisible pedestrian paths that I have there. I'm not even showing this entire process in the time-lapse. It was just taking way too long, especially doing all the rest of the embankment over here. I was just putting the retaining walls everywhere, the concrete walls. I had to make sure that they go exactly below the tracks. They're not cutting any tracks, because maybe I am going to do some first-person rides of the trains as well. Maybe not, but I just, don't want to like completely ruin it at this point, so I would have to rebuild it later if I decided to. So it's kind of a lot more work here, but, best be done with it and just move on, really. Now, this little triangle here at the side of that Brutalist station, it was kind of awkward. I already prepared it so that it would be open below the tracks, and I eventually just filled it with trees. It kind of felt fitting. There is a plaza nearby. It's going to benefit from some greenery around it, and all the rest of these high-density blocks, there should be some sort of a park right next to them. It shouldn't be just high density, because that would be just a bit too monotone. Even though I am using completely different buildings in these kinds of blocks, different heights as well, sizes and everything, but still, you really should not do those everywhere, absolutely everywhere. There should be something in between different, right? So a park feels fitting. Color-wise, it's definitely very fitting. Now, that was done. I was kind of skipping through it in the time-lapse, to be completely honest. It took much more time to do that, but now we are going to return to the park and do the most important thing, and that is to make it functional. So, I am just building these pedestrian paths like I always do, absolutely everywhere through these areas. I'm building them even through buildings, building them through stairs, connecting all these other pedestrian places around this area, and making sure that, of course, people can reach the train stations, tram stations, the tram stops, and the surface levels, and just everywhere. I was even connecting it through the Olympic Stadium to the flying train, to the space elevator. So there are just cross connections through this area, and people can just arrive from any direction and go to any other direction, really. These pedestrian paths just go absolutely everywhere. That's very necessary, because when we are done with the rest of the area around it, we're going to have this like a properly high density, then all these pedestrian paths are going to be very heavily used. That's exactly how it eventually ended with the main transportation hub, and that's exactly how it's going to end up in here. In the cinematics today, we are not really going to see that many people use this place, because there are not that many places around the park finished. But later, that's going to be finished, and that's when people are going to start using this place a lot more. Just like they do all the rest of the places in the city, where I said exactly the same thing. We are not really going to have the pedestrians there at first, but we will have them there eventually. So that's exactly how it's going to happen over here. Don't worry about that. And when it does, I'm definitely going to do some overall cinematics of the area, so we can enjoy all the people just, using the place how it was intended. Right, so this was now the main point of this entire park, these crystals. I downloaded these crystals, I think, even when I was building Aurelia still. I was just, trying to place them somewhere. I eventually didn't, because I did not really find a suitable place. But I kept them for Asturis, and right when I built the Olympic Stadium, I immediately knew that those crystals are going to end up behind the stadium in some kind of a park. I believe that, the stadium is the proposed, I'm not even sure if it's going to be built or not, stadium for Tokyo. It's absolutely huge. And the real-life stadium is also going to have some sort of a park right next to it. So I guess I was kind of like principally inspired by that idea for the park in here. But when I was just browsing through some assets, I noticed that I have these crystals, and I immediately knew that I have to put them in some sort of a park, some sort of an open terrain, and just scatter them around the park and just be there, just have them there. Unfortunately, they are buildings, they are terrain conforming buildings, so I cannot really scale them up and down, which would be ideal. That would be absolutely ideal. If they were props, I could just make them larger and smaller and have them more varied. So not only in colors, but also in sizes. That would be so much better. But we just have it like this. They are all pretty much the same size, but there are some slight variations between their shapes, so at least there's that, and they have those different colors. Now, from last time, I already mentioned that I don't really want to focus that much on the night lights, because the rest of the area just needs to make more sense before I commit to some of the lights. So now I have already some good idea about the area, how it's going to look in combination with the stadiums, of course, and the park. So I can start doing these lights so that it's just going to work with the rest of these places that I built today. And I guess that I'm just going to go overboard with these lights, like in many places around the city center, really. Yeah, I know it's not exactly that great, but I just like them. I just really like these night lights. And in City Skylines, they actually look surprisingly good, because night lights, when you zoom out, they are not disappearing. So even if you zoom out a lot from the city, all of these details, as you can see, are going to be still visible. So that's really, really great. And it's just going to create something more interesting. And inside the crystals, I placed those white lights so that they are going to kind of like shine. I was thinking that maybe they're going to like shine with the color of the crystal, but nah, it's just going to be white. So even if you zoom out, you don't really see the colors of the crystals. That's unfortunate. It would be a lot more work to just put the appropriate colors into every single crystal. I really don't want to do that. Even though, yeah, now that I'm talking about it, that would probably look a lot better. Now, what's really great about the new stadium, the Viking ship stadium, is that the spine of it actually lights up during the night in like a very nice white stripe. Unfortunately, it has that random behavior of night lights, so sometimes it's off, sometimes it's on, sometimes it's like halfway there. But when all of four are lit up, it's looking really great. So I did not add any custom lights to that new stadium because it was not needed, and it's just going to have the stripe. It's looking really, really good. This particular shot is something that I really enjoy looking at because it's just showing that super high density and just like everything. All the puzzle pieces are finally coming together. And yeah, sure, unfortunately there are still some gaps here and there, but this is just giving you some sort of like a glimpse of how it's eventually going to look. And this is what I was saying from like one of the earlier episodes. I really want to start having these like overall shots of the city where I can just see all these results in like one place and not a single gap between them, not a single unfinished area. We are approaching that state, but we are still far away from completion, really, because there are so many places that I need to finish in the center of the city, especially on the ring line, where I would also like to do some kind of tram ride. Like I mentioned in the previous episode, the trams are just going absolutely everywhere in the city, so pushing for the tram rides is kind of pushing for the completion of the entire city anyway. But, well, we are slowly getting there. We are very, very slowly, but surely getting to the completion. Yeah, this kind of shot. I can finally now show some sort of like larger area around the transportation hub, and it's going to be finished. Yeah, sure, with some kind of unpolished edges still, but we will get there. We will eventually get there, and that's what counts. Anyway, guys, that is going to be all from today's Asturis episode. In the next one, I haven't really decided yet where I'm going to go, if I'm going to build some highways or go to finish that mall park or mall plaza at the back of it. So I will see. I will have to decide what I feel like building. Anyway, that's going to be all for today. Thank you for watching this Asturis episode. Hope you liked it. If you did, please do all the things below the video, all the clicking, writing, and subscribing, sharing, and whatever else. And huge thanks to channel members who are directly supporting this channel and me, what I'm doing here. I hugely appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. Take care. Goodbye.